This episode has been made possible thanks to the support of our sponsors, Sunsail.
Whenever you start anything, you have two jars. You've got your experience jar and you've got your luck jar. Experience and luck. Now, when you start, your luck jar has got a certain number of beads in it, but you don't know how many it's got in it. And every time you go out, when you don't really know what you're doing, you take a bead out of the luck jar and you put it in the experience jar. And one day, that jar's going to empty. The luck will run out, but you don't know when that's going to be. And you just have to hope the experience jar is full enough for you to deal with your luck running out.
Hi guys, welcome to another episode of the Sailing Podcast with me, Theo Stocker. And I am very privileged to be here in the home of Monty Halls, who is a former Royal Marine, a marine biologist, and more recently, a sailor.
Questionable.
Monty, thank you very much for having me here.
No worries, no, lovely to have you here.
It's lovely to see your home in the depths of Devon.
I'm incredibly impressed by your podcast setup as well. It's all very professional.
Well, it's all a bit of a learning curve. So, but hopefully it sounds all right and looks all right. So, give us a thumbs up if you like it, guys. But yeah, Monty, I just was really keen to hear some of your stories because you've been writing for Yachting Monthly now for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, pretty much since I started sailing, really, and it just struck me the sort of absurdity of it and the vast range of conflicting emotions that are involved in starting sailing. I thought, people need to hear about this. You know, I need to write all this down. Because, sort of exploring the full tidal range of emotions every time I went sailing. It was such fun. And I just really wanted to communicate it somehow. So thank you very much for running the pieces. I've really enjoyed writing.
No, I mean, some of the stories that have come out have been brilliant and stuff that we all recognise about boat ownership and the hazards and pitfalls of boat ownership and taking our families out sailing and taking your dog sailing and all of those perilous activities.
Well, you mentioned, the hazards and pitfalls of boat ownership. That's the reason we're here today, Theo, isn't it? And not on my boat.
Yes, exactly. So why don't we start with, what is your boat and where is she now?
So my boat's called Sobec. She's a Colvic 34. She's a thing of beauty and wonder.
A good, solid boat.
Oh, she really is. And before I bought her, I was advised by the previous owner, Justin, who also writes for Yachting Monthly, of course, just that. He said she's a safe boat, safe, solid boat, really good for a family and really good to learn your craft on. You ain't going anywhere fast in Sobec.
No.
But she's kind of bomb-proof. She's a big, solid lump. But I think she's one of the best Colvic 34s in the country because she's been beautifully fitted out. Ray Marine were kind enough to sponsor a project I did on her. So she's really well kitted out. And and it's a joy to sail. She's kind of a motor sailor, but slightly more emphasis on the sailing side than the motor side.
Yeah, and she's got a big deck saloon, doesn't she? So
yes.
You can sit down below, not down below, but inside and have the lovely views.
Yeah. I'm over 6 foot and I can stand completely upright in the saloon. And again, Ray Marine, wonderful. And they've put a little remote steering thing inside. So when the weather's bad, I just sit inside with a cup of coffee and I stand inside, looking at the saloon windows.
Very civilised.
And driving along. Yeah, it is very civilised.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
But she's not in the water right now, is she?
No. I think so. She was built in 1979, I think it was, 1979. So she's a glorious old boat. But whenever you buy an old boat, you buy a bunch of other things as well. So you buy every little quirk that boat may have. And I was prepping her about a month or so ago, all excited, thinking, okay, we're going to have a decent season sailing this year. And I just noticed when she was out of the water being clean that the P bracket just didn't look quite right.
So the P bracket, just explain what the P bracket is.
So the P bracket holds the prop shaft basically before it gets...
So it comes out, the prop shaft comes out at an angle out of the bottom of the boat, and then just before you get to the prop, there's usually a nice piece of sort of cast bronze or something expensive like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
With a hole through it and the propeller shaft goes
And you've
through
got
that.
your cutlass bearing on there as
Yeah,
well. So it's a bracket that just holds the prop shaft.
Stop the shaft wobbling around. And
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And I looked at it and I thought, that doesn't look right. And I got some hairy bum bloke rolly smoking with some overalls walking past who plainly knew what he was on about.
I mean, they know what they're talking
Oh,
about.
they do, don't they? Paint
Yeah.
spattered overalls. I was like, mate, could you come and have a look at this? I don't think this looks quite right. And sure enough, he was like, oh, yeah. So electrolysis, basically. And one of the hazards of being in a marina, so she overwintered in a marina, as you know, is you can get this sort of closed loop, can't you?
Yeah.
Of vessels that keep their electric on all the time. And that's pretty much, we're convinced, as what has happened.
On your electric or somebody else's, do you think?
Yeah, well, I don't have my electric on when I'm not on the boat.
Yeah.
And so we think it must have been someone else's. And it's slowly sort of honeycombed and eaten itself, basically. So, we're having to replace the P bracket. So we're having to have one made specially.
Because you were hoping to buy an off-the-shelf one,
Correct.
which would be nice and simple and quick.
Correct.
But this is a boat.
Yeah.
So.
No, yes. And the words nice, simple, and quick rarely appear when related to boats, don't they? So, so it's going to be 8 weeks or so, 7-8 weeks, while one's machined up and made up. But the one thing yachting and boating teaches you is to be an optimist, I think, and look on the bright side. She wasn't out of the water this winter, so it's 2 months when she's going to be out of the water. All those millions of jobs that I kept saying I was going to do. It was a honking winter this winter, wasn't it? It was awful.
Yeah. Lots of wind and wet. And,
because it just rained all the time. I didn't get around to doing the wood. I didn't get around to doing half the jobs I wanted to do. So I've got no excuse now. 2 months while this is being fitted in. She'll be back in end of May.
Okay, so you'll still get the summer.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So, and it's just, it's part of the gig, isn't it, of boat ownership. And
you were saying with it about the P bracket that they're actually going to 3D print this thing.
Yeah.
Is that out of bronze? Is that sort of... or
No, I think it's going to be steel.
Steel, okay.
I think it's going to be steel. And again, it's funny, isn't it? It's like old technology meets new technology. What you've got is a 50-year-old boat here that's having a new part 3D printed for it because they couldn't get one off the shelf, and that might be due to the age of the boat, that's being 3D printed and then delivered. And just, I don't want to be nerdy about it, but I've learned a lot about P brackets over the last couple of weeks. The reason the electrolysis occurred is it wasn't earthed into the hull. It was only glassed into the hull, if you see what I mean. So what they're going to do as part of the new fitting is they're going to earth it into the hull as
Which
well.
means having a wire that then connects it up to, you're presumably up to some anodes.
Correct.
Directly connects it to an anode, and then
Correct.
the anode will fizz away and disintegrate rather than the P bracket.
Yeah. So everything else in the boat is earthed except for that P bracket.
Okay.
So, but it's quite interesting. If the boat hadn't been lifted out and I hadn't have spotted it, and that gent hadn't said, "Oh yeah, you got an issue there," then I would have merrily carried on my way, and that P bracket would have got worse and worse, and almost inevitably would have broken, which meant my prop shaft would have dropped straight down. And I was chatting to a sort of proper briny, barnacle-encrusted sailor the other day, and he said, "Oh yeah, that can be really bad because your prop shaft can drop out, basically." So yeah,
and then you're left with no propulsion and a whacking big hole in the bottom of the boat.
Correct. Two very bad things, I think, when combined. So, again, trying to be philosophical about it. I'm like, she's such a great boat. And, it would be awful if something like that happened. But it's just one of those things you've got to stay on top of, haven't you? And I think one of the things of boat ownership that has really struck me over the last 3 years is how nice people are and how happy they are to give advice.
Yes.
People who are really experienced and not in a patronising way, not so always ask. I think.
Yeah.
Always ask. If you're unsure about something, people love sharing their expertise.
Oh, and it's taken them years of blood, sweat and toil to
Yeah.
accumulate that knowledge, and actually people like sharing it,
Yeah,
don't
and
they?
that geezer that wandered past looked pretty intimidating. I was like, oh God, he's obviously like circumnavigated the world 4 times and he knows it and he'll think I'm a muppet. But of course they don't. They just want to go and say, yeah, well done, you picked that up. There is something not quite right there. And so that thing of just asking all the time, I think really just makes life so much easier.
Yeah.
And my P brackets. So I discovered about P brackets.
I think we're going to come on to in a little bit your sort of journey into sailing and how you've done that, learning a little bit at a time, which I'm really looking forward to hearing about that. Before we go any further, can you just tell us a little bit about where we are? I noticed you've got a small animal on your lap.
I do have a rodent-sized dog on my lap.
It is, just to confirm, it is a dog.
It is a dog.
Just a small one.
So, it's my therapy dog. It's my comfort dog. Yeah, whenever I'm being interviewed.
And who's this one?
Right, this is Dasher.
Yeah.
Outside, we've got Luna, fast asleep on the
She'd be a little bit heavier on your lap.
Golden Retriever.
Yeah, a large golden
So
retriever.
basically, this one happened because of this one. So that's my youngest lass.
So that's a picture on your wall of your daughter there.
Yeah, called Moles, who was just desperate to get a dachshund and just wore us down over 6 months or so. It was a relentless campaign of attrition and wore us down. And come on. And in the end, so we got a miniature dachshund. This is a new addition to the house. And who, I must say, initially I was like, what is that? When it appeared, it's like I said, this little rodent. We've got enough rodents in this house, and she is an absolute delight. The thing we forget about these animals is they were bred to hunt badgers. They're little psychos. They're little sociopaths. It's like Ray Winston but shorter, and full of beans. Great fun, and the new addition to the horse
Has
house.
she been? He or she?
She.
Has she been on the boat yet?
Not yet, because of course the boat's been out, and over winter I used to go down and do odds and bobs on it, but we didn't take her out much. So it'd be a new experience for her. But
Luna's been on the boat.
Luna is the most fantastic boat dog. When you have a dog, they're either good boat dogs or not good boat dogs. They either like it or they don't like it. She has this weird, incredibly misplaced trust in her skipper, me. So she just clambers on, finds a little spot, goes to sleep. We've done some good passages together. We've been down to the Sillies with her. We've done all sorts. And she just kips, basically. So, or looks over the side. She's this sort of philosophical mariner. She looks over the side. You can see sort of thoughts going through her head. Saying,
She doesn't question your skippering decisions.
No, the rest of the family, that's their responsibility. But the dog... the way dogs are. She just looks at you adoringly. She's like, I don't understand what you're doing, but you're doing it brilliantly. That's a dog thing, isn't it? So,
it's just what you want in a crew.
Yeah. And the nice thing about this one, completely portable, which is one of the reasons Tam was like, okay, if we get a second dog, we'll get a little one. So potentially quite a good boat dog, I think.
So we'll see how she gets on this summer then.
Yeah, although she's very good at getting into small spaces and chewing things. So again, that's probably the next dilemma we'll have on Sobec. So yeah.
Cool. So that's Sobec, where she's up to now. But in terms of your career and where your desire to get on a sailing boat has come from, where does the love of the sea come from for you?
It's always been sort of deeply inculcated in me, this whole thing with the sea. And I think it came from the fact that when I was a kid, when I was really little, we lived in Malta. And so my formative years were spent swimming around in the Mediterranean. That was just a feature of what we did there. And of course, so that was up to about the age of about 4. And then we've always lived in the southwest. So the coast, again, has always featured for us as a family. And we used to go camping and it was always on the coast. So Cousteau was on the telly. Cousteau was my hero, this red bobble-hatted gladiator legionnaire going out. And, of course, he was a global sensation back in the day. Gerald Durrell, Gavin Maxwell. All these people were my heroes. And so I was only ever going in one direction. I was only ever going to do something around the sea. And that manifested itself in, after I left school, I went traveling for a year, worked as a diving instructor out in Australia for a year. And then came back, did a year of odds and bobs, and then joined the Royal Navy. And after a year in the Navy, I decided that I wanted to join the Royal Marines. So I transferred.
A little bit more action and a little bit less bureaucracy.
Yes, yeah.
Maybe. I don't know if that's doing the Navy a disservice there, but
no. And I agree with the last part of that comment. The Navy is an extraordinary organisation, and they've had a success in battle that's only been matched by the Roman legions. I mean, they have an extraordinary organisation, but it just doesn't fit everyone. And for me, I think I was looking for something a bit more physical, and because I always really enjoyed the physical side of life. I sort of wanted a direct challenge to that physicality, and that was getting the Green Beret, trying to get the Green Beret.
And that means becoming a Royal Marine.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And also, I think they operate because they're a smaller organisation than the Royal. They're part of the Royal Navy, but they're a smaller organisation within the Royal Navy. And they operate a slightly more flattened hierarchy, if you see what I mean. They're slightly more egalitarian, I think. And I spotted that even as a young man. I thought, I kind of like the way these guys are going about their business. So I transferred, which meant going back to day one of training and then doing the whole of...
Having done a whole year of officer training.
Yeah. And then I did my commando training and then ended up doing a decade in the Marines.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what would any highlights from that time in the Marines?
Yeah, I mean, I picked a very quiet 10 years in terms of operational stuff, and it was pretty much straight after I left that everything kicked off, Iraq, Afghanistan and all that. So operationally I did nothing, I didn't do anything of note, never fired a shot in anger. But I worked out in South Africa for a year. So when Nelson Mandela was elected as president of South Africa, he got 30 Brits to come out as a sort of advisory team because he was repatriating his guerrilla army to what was a guerrilla army, but one man's guerrilla is another man's freedom fighter. So the armed wing of the ANC were coming back in to become part of the South African army. Spent a year out in South Africa, working as part of Nelson Mandela's British military advisory team. So that was amazing. This seeing history happen all around you, and did a few Norway deployments and a few, lots of training exercises, but I was with 4-5 Commando for a while and ended up becoming a PTI, becoming a physical training officer, essentially, because, again, that physical element of life, which in turn led to me getting into expeditions.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what were the kind of expeditions you were doing then?
Well, within the Marines, I didn't do a huge amount. I did one called the New Millennium Expedition towards the tail end of my career, which was amazing. That was obviously over the millennium. And that was going to the Raspaculo Basin in the Maya Mountains in Central America and diving jungle pools to try and film Morelet's crocodiles, which had never been filmed before underwater. So that was probably one of the big ones. But then through that, I ended up working for an organisation called the Scientific Exploration Society and did a whole bunch of expeditions for them. And that's what led to me sort of doing what I do today, really.
And through all of this, it seems you've had, with the sort of the Jacques Cousteau inspiration, there's been a bit of sort of marine biology, sort of interest in the natural world alongside the physical stuff. Where's that come from, and how did you sort of develop that?
Yeah, it was like the perfect marriage in a way of the sort of logistics and operating in tricky environments that the Royal Marines give you, the physicality as well that the Royal Marines give you. Kind of allied to, so when I left the Marines, I did a marine biology degree. So I had the marine biology side as well. So that gave me the ability to take people to some pretty weird and remote places and hopefully, in retrospect, do some decent work out there, do some decent conservation work and community projects. And so latterly, I've sort of slightly more pushed down the conservation side, really. And I think in particular trying to communicate about the natural world and communicate the parlous state of the ocean and all that. So yeah, it's been this sort of, we're all a blend of our previous experiences, aren't we? And I think that is they're the predominant features of that blend, of that smoothie that is me.
Yeah.
Is the raw marine side, the conservation side, the marine biology side, and the ability to sort of combine those to create projects.
And I have to say, you write for Yachting Monthly, and your ability to communicate, obviously you've done lots of TV work and that kind of stuff as well. So clearly you've got an ability to communicate and get ideas across in a way that brings people with you. So maybe that's the sort of the glue that holds it all together now a bit.
True. And that's very kind of you to say that. And I think it's sort of dumb luck. We all have something, don't we, that we can kind of do, that we can turn our hand to. And I think the writing, I've always been able to write. I've always really loved writing stuff down ever since I was a little kid. And that's what I would say to my girls. Everyone's got a super strength. And weirdly, that was my super strength. It was my way of getting my thoughts down. And so that muscle was constantly used. And it's a joy to be able to write stuff in the magazine and write other books and everything that communicate these themes to a wider audience. It's the same as telly, really. It's lovely to be able to communicate themes you're passionate about to a wider audience.
Yeah. And so what are some of the things you've done? You've done Great Escapes.
Yeah. So TV-wise, so I made a fair few series about diving, did a thing called Dive Mysteries, where we went off trying to solve the great underwater mysteries around the world. That was for Channel 5. Did a couple of series called Great Ocean Adventures, where we went off looking at the great marine encounters in the world. Did the Great Escape series for the BBC, which was 3 series. Well, went and lived in remote communities on the west coast of Scotland and west coast of Ireland. Did Fisherman's Apprentice, where I worked as a fisherman, crab fisherman.
How was that? How did you find that? Because they have a pretty tough life, don't they?
It's brutal. Redefine what you think is a tough day at work until you've worked on a under 10 metre crabber on a blowy day off the tip of Cornwall. But they're a fascinating culture, are fishermen, in that they're a tribe. They're the last group of hunter-gatherers we have in our society, the last people that hunt wild food for our consumption. And they have, it goes back thousands of years. They have their own traditions, culture, language. They're incredibly hardworking people, really proud of who they are. And they're playing with a stacked deck, against a stacked deck, really. In terms of legislation, doesn't particularly favour them. It's a really tough way to make a living. So I left that experience just full of admiration for the people who did it.
What's a day on a crab boat like?
Well, you're up at about 3 or 4 in the morning. You head down in Cadgwith, where I worked. You get the boats off the beach. You'll go and haul the pots that you've laid out, over the preceding days. You'll probably haul during the course of a day, depends on the size of the boat, you'll probably haul 100, 200 pots maybe. And each one weighs 10 kilograms or so. So you're hauling them over the side of the boat. You're taking the crabs out. You're putting the bait back in. You're putting them back there on a gym floor. It's like 2 kettlebells. You're holding 2 kettlebells on a gym floor that's doing this. You'll do that for 6-7 hours, and then you'll come back in. You process the catch, and in terms of manual labour, hard graft, it's unbelievable. And the respect they are due from all of us is earned. I couldn't believe what hard work it was when I did it.
Yeah, I mean, we go to sea in sort of nice little comfortable yachts where we're sort of putting the kettle on and maybe grinding a winch occasionally if we haven't got electric winches already.
Yeah.
Where they're just out sort of hard work. So and presumably they're really sort of instinctive seafarers as well, because they're out there to not sort of enjoy the process of navigation. They just get to where they're going, and then they're doing their hard work.
But one of the interesting things was that most fishermen in Britain are ancestral. So they've taken a boat from their dad, who took it from granddad, who took it from great granddad. So they've got this amazing sort of family lineages of doing it. And but the bit that amazed me is I thought it would be treated as a day of manual labour to try and generate money for the business. Every small fishing boat is a business. And actually, I found that the vast majority of the guys I work with, certainly down in Cadgworth, are really passionate about it and really enjoyed a good day at sea and enjoyed fishing and enjoyed recovering the pots to see what was in the pots. Oh, amazing day today, you know, it was fantastic. And Nige, who was the amazing old boy I worked with, was my skipper. You know, he'd be like, isn't it a lovely day today, Monty? Aren't we lucky to be out here doing this, you know? And that side, that more sort of romantic, spiritual side of fishing, I found was alive and kicking, actually. And I almost thought it would have been beaten out of everyone just due to the intensity of what they were doing, but that wasn't the case. And that's the reason that, you know, the songs, the poetry, the writing and the culture, I think is so stubbornly alive, is that they see something beyond, not all fishermen, but they see something beyond the simple thing of taking your vehicle out to get produce, to bring it back to sell it. It's beyond that. Yeah, you know, it's heritage, it's history, it's in the footsteps of their, you know, forebears, essentially.
It's doing something because it's who they are rather than we've got a business to run and I need to go make money.
Yeah. And yes, correct. They have that keen sense of identity. And with that comes a set of rules and the way you go about your business and the way you look after your communities and look after each other. And a fisherman's got a 1 in 20 chance of being killed during the course of their working life.
1 in 20?
1 in 20. It's the most dangerous profession in the UK. Yeah, it's amazing. So they look out for each other, you know. And so all of that is really prevalent. You know, they ply their trade in one of the most dangerous environments in the world, you know, and recovering heavy gear from the seabed, lots of tangled lines, or your boat going like that, you're tired. It's a tough way to earn a living. But with that comes a culture, mutually supportive culture, I think.
Amazing. And then you've done some other interesting things. So I wanted to hear a little bit about your Galapagos trip, which you did with your family on that one.
Yeah, so 20 years ago, more now, 25 years ago, I made a film out in Galapagos about the Galapagos penguin. And that started a relationship that has lasted 25 years and I hope lasts for the rest of my life. So going back to the islands, doing little conservation projects, leading groups out there. And I ended up working for the Galapagos Conservation Trust, or helping out the Galapagos Conservation Trust, and over time became president of the Galapagos Conservation Trust. And because of that, I thought, wouldn't it be amazing to actually go and live in the islands with my family, with my young girls, and tell the story of the people who live out there and the scientists and the conservation work that's being done and all the conflicts of interest that are naturally sort of inherent wherever people move to a remote set of islands. So, we did that, made 2 series for Channel 4 out there. And the pictures behind me here, that was from Galapagos, that was from Galapagos. So,
amazing. Must have been an incredible experience for young children to be out there as well.
Yeah, it was. It was really amazing. But the interesting thing and the counterintuitive thing, it was amazing. And we were so privileged to be doing it. Galapagos is 13 main islands, of which 4 have people living on them. 98% of the archipelago is, you've got a whole bunch of smaller islands as well, is national park. So you can't visit it without a guide being there. So there's this amazing sort of preservation in terms of 95% of the species that were originally there when the islands were discovered in 1535 are still there. And that's
pretty unheard of today.
For island groups, isolated island groups, that is pretty much unheard of. So the Ecuadorian government have done an amazing job looking after those islands. And we were privileged to be there, and we'll talk about it for the rest of our lives. But what we overlook is the where we live here, you know, in the UK. We live lives of unimaginable luxury, most of us. And that was really brought home to us because the Galapagos are 600 miles offshore. They're bang on the equator. When we lived on Isabella, which we did the second time, there wasn't any running water. There wasn't, with 2 little kids, you suddenly realise, the life we lead here.
Yeah.
And that's actually, so it's a World Heritage Site. Like I said, it's a privilege that we got to go there. But actually, when we got back, we were like, God, we're so lucky to live where we live, actually, with everything at our fingertips, national health, all this sort of stuff. And it was weird. You don't expect that, do you, to be your sort of prevalent thought when you leave this incredible set of islands. But it was, weirdly.
Yeah. Well, it's an amazing lesson to come home with as well,
Yes.
that it's sort of, you've had an incredible experience and it makes you appreciate what you come home to more as well.
Yes, exactly. And the support networks we have, the social services, it sounds really random talking about all this, doesn't it? But then you're having lived a more basic life and felt that sense of slight vulnerability and isolation with two little kids. The kids were 5 and 3 when we were out there. You're like,
You can't just nip to the pharmacy to pick up some more, whatever you need.
Yeah. And on Isabella, you rely on the supply ship coming in. And if the supply ship doesn't come in, it's ready, steady, cook. It's a hell of a challenge. You go to the market and you've got like 1 red pepper and a bag of sugar. That's how you got to feed your family. So, but as an experience, it'll stay with us forever. And there were times when it was quite tough, particularly for Tam, because of everything I'm saying, And there were times when she got a little bit down, and so did I, and I said to her, our children will show the films we're making about our life here to their grandchildren. That's how significant what we're doing is, and how lucky we are to do it. But what we did do is go beyond the tourist experience, if you see what I mean, which is amazing, incredible, life-changing. But it was interesting to see that.
Hi guys, Theo here with a quick message from our sponsors, Sunsail. So, summer's not over yet, and if you haven't made it out on the water, this might be your moment. Right now, Sunsail has their summer offer with up to 20% off sailing holidays, meaning the Croatian islands, the Greek sailing routes, the quiet bays, and the long afternoons at anchor are all still on the table. Pick up a Sunsail bareboat charter and you're in charge of the whole thing. Where you go, when you leave, and how long you want to stay. The kind of sailing where you drop anchor somewhere simply because it looks good. And you'll be doing it aboard Sunsail's award-winning yachts, recognised across the charter industry for their modern design, sailing performance and onboard comfort. Boats chosen to make sailing smoother, easier and a lot more fun once you're out there. Also, if you like the idea of sailing, but with a bit of extra support while still keeping your own yacht, Sunsail flotillas are a great option too. You'll get your own boat and crew, but with expert guidance, local knowledge and a friendly sailing community alongside you. So if you're ready for more wind in the sails and less routine on land, search Sunsail Summer Sailing Special or check the offers page through the link in the description below to see where you could still sail this season. Right, let's get back to the podcast. Yeah, I mean, I've got a theory that all of the stuff that shapes who we are and the stories that we tell when we're older or whenever, the stories that we tell are almost always experiences that were not sort of easy, comfortable experiences at the time. There was an element of challenge where you have to sort of persevere or overcome some challenge or discomfort or something.
You could be describing my sailing career.
But that's what shapes us and forms the stories that we become and the characters that we develop when we choose to sort of persevere with that sort of stuff.
Well, that's why sailing, for me, is... I just can't give it up. I've almost tried. I've almost been like, okay, can I justify having a boat on the river still? Do we get out in it enough? And I can't give it up. I can't walk away from it. Terrible analogy, this, but I compare it to golf in a way, or surfing. It's a cooler analogy.
Yeah, that's a better analogy.
Yeah. You never nail surfing. You never get as good as you want to be. And golf is the same. And sailing's the same. You never fully nail it. You can never say, yeah, I'm the finished article now, I'm done. Every time you go out, you get challenged and you learn something. And certainly with me, I get a little bit unnerved by something that I haven't encountered before. And that's completely addictive, that feeling, I think.
Yeah. So let's go back to the start of, you've done all of the TV and the adventures and the expeditions. What possessed you to decide that you wanted to become a sailor and buy a boat and start off on that voyage?
Well, I've been on boats most of my life. So you'd think, wouldn't you, that a transition would be easy. but I haven't sailed. So everything I've had ribs, always owned ribs to do the diving projects, and I'm kind of across the navigation vaguely, you know. And I thought it's such a natural segue. I've got a young family. I live in Dartmouth. Let's get a yacht, you know.
As one does in Dartmouth.
As one does. If one is called Monty in Dartmouth, then one buys a yacht. And I thought, oh, this will be a breeze, if you pardon the pun. This will be a piece of cake. You know, I'll get the vessel, I'll go out. I'm going to be really good at it, you know, because of all my previous experiences, you know. And I've said this to many, many people. When I first took Sobec out, which I did with a phenomenally competent skipper, which is Justin. And so when we first went out, and indeed when I first took her out on myself, my predominant emotion was alarm. Because this vessel didn't behave the way it's supposed to behave when you've got a rib with two engines at the back and you're pointed at something.
And the engines turn the way you want to go. And
yeah, exactly. Didn't behave the way I wanted to behave. And all I was aware of is I was in the grip of these elemental forces like tide, current because of the river, wind. And the moment I put the sails up, you suddenly become aware there's a lot of power there, huge amounts of power. It reminded me of riding a horse that you're not fully in control of, that can potentially go anywhere. But the problem there was it was Sobec 7 tons. She's a big old girl. It's 7 tons that is like a trolley with a wobbly wheel, and you're surrounded by all these very expensive things that you can hit. Everyone's looking at you. And I found it really discombobulating when I first went out. But I got really good counsel from Justin.
So Justin is Justin Morton, writes for Yachting Monthly as well, also a former Royal Marine.
Correct.
He's also been on this podcast and maybe so again.
Yeah.
Very knowledgeable, yacht master, instructor. What he doesn't know about sailing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so his wise words, and I bought Sobec off him.
Yeah.
So which did make me realise that Sobec was a really sound boat, because that's recommendation enough that Justin had bought her. And his wise words were, he said, year one, this is what you're going to do. So we live in Dartmouth. Round the corner, you got Blackpool Sands. It's like a mile away. He said, you're going to putter to Blackpool Sands. It's going to be a beautiful day. You're going to drop the anchor. The kids are going to jump off the saloon roof. You're going to inflate a stand-up paddleboard. You're going to mess around on the beach. You're going to have a pie and a croissant in the cockpit. And then at the end of the day, you're going to putter back. And then you're going to overnight on your mooring. And then you might, as the year goes on, you might go a little bit further afield, put the sails up when it's a beautiful day. He said, that's all you're going to do. You're not going to sail to the Azores. You're not going to heel her over at 45 degrees. You're not going to do any of that. Because if you do, you'll scare the hell out of yourself and you'll scare your family half to death. And it will become a very unpleasurable thing to do. And he was absolutely right, which made the decision to sail to the Scillies and get caught in like a force 9 particularly ridiculous, because that's what we did on year one. So, there were wise words, I think.
That you partially heeded.
I heeded them for a while, and then a great project came up, a good conservation project, and I thought, well, we'll take Sobec, we'll do it as a family, and thunder down there, yeah. And so we had all sorts of adventures en route.
Yeah, so you've been down to the Isles of Scilly. What are some of the other adventures that you've done on Sobec so far? You've had 3 years?
3 years. 3 years. Yeah. So that's tended to be, to my lingering shame, that has tended to be the route we operate on. So, we go down to Falmouth we go into the Yelm, the Helford River, that's our beat on Sobec. It's 120 miles from Dartmouth to the Scillies, and we've done the Scillies every year that we've had her.
Yeah.
And so it's been lovely. I mean, the Scillies is this magical archipelago.
It's unbelievably stunning, isn't it?
Beautiful. And there is that sort of, so it's the third year of ownership now, and there's that kind of comfort of familiarity and comfort, but it's still enough of you're crossing the shipping lanes when you go from Land's End to the Scillies. It's a decent day's push, so you're out of sight of land, all of that stuff. But I'm just at the point now of thinking, oh yeah, I want to spread my wings a little bit now. And I've got a great mate who lives in the Channel Islands, and he said, come on, you've got to get across the Channel Islands. It's 60 miles from here, so it's a decent day sail, really. So, and I really, really want to sail around the coast of the UK.
Yeah.
So that's the...
Yeah, I think both of those, round the UK is definitely on my bucket list. I still haven't done that. But one thing that I would say, I did Salcombe to Alderney when we had a Sadler 29, and that was the first time that we'd done cross channel, just me and my wife, before we had children, and we decided to go for Alderney because that's the closest. It's not necessarily the easiest to get into, because I got the tidal calculations completely wrong, because I thought, do you know what, I need favourable tide, so I'll go across and I'll get swept up to Alderney and go in. What I hadn't taken account of was you have to cross the Swinge, which is the little channel between, there are some rocks just north of Alderney called Burhu, and then you've got Alderney, and it looks sort of a nice open harbour that's easy to get into. Oh, that's great, we'll just come up the channel, turn right past those rocks, and we'll go in. What I hadn't taken account of is the tide coming up at 6 knots or whatever, 5 knots up the Swinge. I think it was doing 5 knots up the Swinge, and by the time we got there, it was obviously dark. So then you're in the dark, and it wasn't a particularly windy day, and we had a following wind, and it was all lovely. But then doing a handbrake turn and trying to cross the Swinge at maximum flow is completely the wrong strategy.
Yeah.
Because then, obviously, you head up into the tide to keep going in a straight line to where you're trying to get to. But our boat could do 6 knots under engine, and the tide was doing 5 knots. And I knew that, obviously, if you turn up to sort of 45 degrees, you're making less progress towards where you want to go. As you get to sort of 60 degrees above your track, you start thinking, well, if I go to 70 or 80, I'm just going to stem the tide here and not get anywhere closer. And then if the tide picks up any more than this, I'm going backwards straight towards Cherbourg. So I was there, and eventually we did sort of crab our way across and get in.
Yeah.
And we got in, and my wife said, why are you being so grumpy tonight?
Yeah.
Why can't you just be nice? And I said, I'm not being grumpy. I'm just terrified.
Yeah.
We went in sideways.
That story, I mean, God, the combination of fatigue, that would have been a long, long day. You're coming in the dark, so you're tired, your nerves are jangling, every dial's in the red physiologically and psychologically. And I underestimated the impact of that. So I had the odd situation like that where, start point is obviously pretty feisty, and the odd things where I got it a bit wrong in start point. We'll talk about all the positives in a minute, by the way, and there are many. But I underestimated, thinking I was this former Marine, all this powerboat experience, it'll all be fine. But just how tiring sailing is. A day's sailing, you are cream crackered at the end. And going into the Scillies, for the first time, I was knackered, absolutely knackered. You're at your point of maximum vulnerability when you're making your most important decisions at the end of a trip. And similar, had sort of similar things of like, hang on a minute, we're supposed to be going there. Why is that going sideways when I'm trying to get in that way? And what's that big thing coming at us? And all of that, I found I really had to knuckle down and say, no, keep going. Because with familiarity, there comes, you get more comfortable, don't you, in experiences. There's a great analogy. There was a wingsuit pilot called, I can't remember his name. Jeb Corliss. And he said, whenever you start anything, you have 2 jars. You've got your experience jar and you've got your luck jar. Experience and luck. Now, when you start, your luck jar has got a certain number of beads in it, but you don't know how many it's got in it. And every time you go out, when you don't really know what you're doing, you take a bead out of the luck jar and you put it in the experience jar. And one day, that jar's going to empty. The luck will run out, but you don't know when that's going to be. And you just have to hope the experience jar is full enough for you to deal with your luck running out. And so I, like everyone in sailing, I've had a couple of close-ish calls that weren't really proper dramas. Because nowadays, I think there's almost no excuse to have a real drama, real drama, aside from someone, having a heart attack or something like that, because I think the forecasting tools are so good. The courses are so good. The tidal stream data is so good that if you err on the side of caution, you should never have and you've got the right kit on board, you should never have a really serious incident. But I've had a couple of, scrapes,
Any examples of that?
I think, oddly enough, I mentioned the luck jar and the experience jar. There was enough in the experience jar for me to deal with this.
Yeah.
So I was, end of a long day, I was coming in from Falmouth. So Falmouth to Dartmouth is about 60 miles, I think. Yeah, there or thereabouts. And I did it on my own, and I got to start point, and I was like, yep, going well here. But the wind dropped massively, and I thought, I'll just motor for a bit. So I put the motor on, and the tide was with me. So the idea was, start point sticks out like that. I was a little bit sort of close to shore. So I thought I'll go sort of straight out, and then, because you want to give start point a decent wide, like a mile.
Yeah. You get rough.
Otherwise, it's rough and it's pretty grim there. And you can see all the standing, a sea of knives is the expression that was, all these short standing waves. And so I thought, I'll stick the old engine on. I could see I was just getting to the flat thing and I was losing way a bit. So when I started, the engine wouldn't start. Kept going, wouldn't start. And I looked up and I was like, that is definitely getting closer as the tide was pushing me towards it. Engine wouldn't start. But by then, the engine had broken down so many times that I was a bit of a grease monkey. I thought, right. So I jumped, dived below, and it needed bleeding. The fuel needed bleeding.
Yeah.
So I bled all the fuel lines, and then came back up and started the engine at a sort of an energizingly close proximity to start point. Now, of course, I could have put the anchor down and all that stuff, and I'm sure it would have been fine. But it was just one of those little moments where the luck jar did run out, but the experience jar was full enough.
You'd had enough engine breakdowns to know how to fix it and get yourself out of difficulty.
Well, and I mentioned a moment ago, there's so many great courses out there. I'd done my diesel engine course, only a day, and so I knew the bells and whistles, and also I had a lot of bitter experience in that one of the few sort of big issues I had with Sobec, the first year I had it, was the engine breaking down. And it turns out it was water getting in the fuel and all that. So I was pretty damn good with that engine, had all the right spanners, all the right odds and bobs. So I dived below, and then so I putted out far enough. There was a bit of wind out there, and I sailed in this sort of straight line into Dartmouth. By the time that I got to Dartmouth, God damn, I was Robin Knox Johnson by the time I got in, because I'd fixed my engine, had a problem. I sort of came in like I should have had 2 red flares holding them out like that. And that was such a great feeling. And again, that's part of the addictive thing, I think, is you learn to problem solve, and you think, I got this. Actually.
Yeah, I have to say that coming into harbour after you've survived something either arduous or challenging.
Yeah.
It's always a moment of sort of elation, but also of deflation.
Yes.
I had one similarly coming into Salcombe where we'd escaped a storm. We'd been at sea overnight and they'd been chased down by a storm, and we got in and we're sort of all tucked up in our waterproofs and things. And you come in going, we have just conquered the world.
Yeah.
And you tie up alongside and there's seagulls stealing ice cream and people eating their fish and chips, not turning a blind eye. And you go, don't you know what just happened out there? And you come back in and you're into this sort of shoreside life where it's all sort of neat and safe and it's sort of a weird sort of re-entry into the normal world after you've been in this incredible experience out at sea. And that's one of the appealing things about sailing, I think, is that you only have to go 2 miles offshore and you can sort of test yourself against the elements.
Yes, very true.
Rather than sitting in a car park enjoying the view, eating an ice cream.
That is a really good point, that you don't have to go far to test yourself sailing. And every time I take Sobec out, I feel I'm testing myself. Even, I've had her in Darthaven Marina over the winter. Even getting out of my parking space in Darthaven is emotional, you know. And of course, and anyone who says it isn't is lying, you know. This whole thing of, I had a lovely old boy who had a boat next to mine when I had her in a marina in Plymouth. And he could see I was a bit nervous. And he said, what you're doing at the moment, he said, is the worst part of sailing. Getting in and out of marinas is the worst part of sailing. He said, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to go below in my boat. I'm going to pull the curtains. I'm not going to watch you. I will be doing my own thing. I'm not going to watch. I was like, oh, thanks so much. Because I could see this, you know, sort of grey-bearded, tatty Guernsey sweater, oily hands. I was like, oh, God, it's going to be awesome. And that means I'm going to mess this up because, you know, as we all know, sailing is a spectator sport. Certainly getting in and out of marinas is. And so I think every single time I go out, I feel a bit challenged. And that's a weird juxtaposition of thinking, why do I do this? Why am I doing this to myself? And also thinking this is completely addictive. You know, when you do tie up back alongside, you're like, yeah, that's
a good feeling.
It's a great feeling. Yeah.
And obviously you've been doing this, some of this you've been doing alone, but some of it you've been doing with a family and a dog.
Yeah.
How's that experience been?
So
and how have they found it?
Yeah. So I feel I'm being a bit negative about sailing, and I shouldn't be. It has brought us as a family, all of our great memories over the last 3 years have been on the boat. You know, all of our really good experiences. So if the girls were sitting here around the table, if I said to them, what do you think of the boat, girls? Be honest with Theo. And they'd be like, oh, God, we hate it. You know, Dad drags us out in it and all that. But, you know...
They're teenagers now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The moment you get them on board, frequently you have to sedate them or bribe them to get them on board. The moment you get them on board, they come alive, you know, and they're at the bow looking for stuff. They're kind of in the cockpit. Obviously, I'll let them steer and everything. And the mistake I made was that I was so worried about something happening to them that I treated them as passengers, not crew. So I'd say, right, you stay here, don't go forward, you stay, Daddy's got it, you know, I'll do it all. And what that means is you end up with bored kids, you know, and I think that's something I'm really keen to rectify this summer and really get them sailing, get them actively sailing. I felt the weight of responsibility, certainly because I felt I don't really know what I'm doing here. And I've got my family on board this thing. But the one thing about Sobec, which again, Justin, wise words from Justin. So the great thing about Sobec, if you're going to hit something, you're going to hit it very slowly. Sobec doesn't go anywhere fast. And the interesting contrast between powerboat skills and sailing skills is the best thing to do when you are getting in harm's way in a powerboat is powerboat your way out of it, drive your way out of it. The best thing to do is if you are getting yourself in a situation, you're drifting into trouble or whatever on a sailing boat, is just don't try and gun the engine. And, you know, and you see it in Dartmouth all the time of people driving their boats hard because they're panicking and driving themselves. They get real speed going into a hazardous situation as opposed to, okay, and fender, please, family, deploy yourselves with fenders. And we've done that countless times, you know, of like, okay, I haven't got the angle right here. I'm closing with that other vessel, you know, and as long as you're not sort of bow on, you know, and then the human fender, big fleshy fender holding things off. We've done that lots of times. Then again, that's an experience thing of thinking, right, because initially all I tried to do was motor my way out of problems and ended up swinging around and, you know, a few near misses. So again, you know, I think that using the family more than just big fleshy fenders.
Because it's a great opportunity and a great environment to give children responsibility in a surprisingly sort of controlled environment, I think, because you can give them, there are loads of little things to do, whether it's being in charge of the VHF radio or being in charge of the fenders or the outboard and the dinghy and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That they can be, that's their job. And obviously they've got to be engaged and wanting to do that. But see, children always seem to respond so well when they get given not only a job, but something that's their responsibility that has real world consequences.
Yeah. We grossly underestimate that, I think. Because we live in this sort of health and safety world and we're super obsessed with it. And God, if something happened to my girls because I was responsible, and it'd be awful. But you're exactly right. So their thing is the tender. Once we get somewhere, they're in charge of the tender, basically. And that's pumping it up, getting it over the side, attaching the outboard, making sure it's fueled, making sure we've got the right kit on board. And they drive it. They ferry us backwards and forwards.
Yeah.
They fight over who's going to drive it. And it's their little area of responsibility, I think. But I didn't get it right initially, and they just got bored. They were like, why aren't we driving there? We're going to Salcombe. Normally takes 40 minutes. It's going to take 6 hours. Why don't we just drive? And I need to get them away from that mindset. But that's a classic thing of an inexperienced skipper, I think. And but last year we went to Babbacombe. We overnighted in Babbacombe, which is only 15 miles around the corner. We had a pod of dolphins with us on the way there, with young dolphins.
Amazing.
When we anchored, we just stand up paddleboarded around the beautiful little cove there. We did some wild swimming, did some snorkeling, ate, and then sailed back. And it was that weekend when I asked the girls, I was like, what's your best weekend last summer? And they were like, the one when we went to Babbacombe. So,
Yeah, I mean, if you can lay on a barbecue, a nice sunset and some dolphins, it's pretty good entertainment.
Yeah, exactly. And what you're doing, of course, is making memories as well for them. And I know my girls will never forget that weekend in Babbacombe. It was a little thing, and, we didn't go far and we didn't do anything too epic. But it was just glorious. It was absolutely glorious. And it also makes you feel like an utter alpha because you did it, And and it's also quite refreshing, I think, to realise how much you've learned over the last 3 years and actually how across everything you are, It's definitely something I'd like to go a bit further afield with them this year. But the other thing is, and I've alluded to this in articles, is just because we make the decision to buy a boat, I've made the decision to buy a boat, and I've told them this is now their new favourite thing, sailing. Doesn't mean sailing is their favourite thing. And you've got to be quite diplomatic, and you've got to also be quite understanding that there are other things they're going to want to do. They don't necessarily want to come sailing with Dad. So I'm trying to sort of put that in the mix as well.
Get the balance right.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
We've got a little bit longer left, but we're slowly running out of time. I wanted to ask you a little bit about joint ownership, because that's one of the things we've talked about, that you're looking at having somebody else as a sort of a boat owning partner. What's your thought process on that, and where you're up to with that?
It's an easy one. So we've sat at this kitchen table, me and Tam, many times, and said, the boat is wonderful and I love it and I'm very passionate about it, but you've got to justify it financially. Sailing is not cheap, and ongoing expenses over the course of a year are not cheap. And Tam's super supportive, but she's like, haven't used the boat as much as we thought we would this summer, have we? I'm like, right, I know exactly where this is going. You hit, I think, a critical point in boat ownership after 2 or 3 years, where you're starting to reasonably get your head around it. You're starting to really enjoy going out, but either your family's bought into it or they haven't. Either you're thinking, right, I want to go further afield here, or you haven't. And that means you've got to justify the cost. And Sobec's such an amazing boat, such a lovely boat. And so I don't want to sell her, but I don't think we're using her as much as we should maybe use her. Part of that is my work, which takes me away all the time. And so I certainly don't want to sell her. So I've looked at, I'm exploring a syndicate ownership. And I think there's a few benefits to that. And we've got two potential other owners who are going to come in with us. And there's two benefits to that. One is obviously you share the financial load, which is great. There's three benefits, actually. One, you share the financial load. The other thing is knowledge. One of the guys coming in on it is Mr. Sailing. You know, the moment he got on board, I was like, I can just tell by the questions you're asking me, the way you're looking at the boat, you really know what you're on about. And I sort of pushed him a little bit on it. And he was, oh yeah, I was a commodore of a sailing club and blah, blah, blah. Really, really nice guy. So you get the shared knowledge of the other owners as well. And the other thing, and I think this is the main thing, is that the boat gets used. And the way boats decay is if they're not used.
Yeah, you see them going green and mouldy and UV damage and all that sort of stuff.
Make a guilt trip. Every time I go and look at Sobec, I'm like, oh my God, look, there's a bit of green there. And I try and you just feel guilty. And I won't feel guilty if I know Sobec's out there being sailed, being used. And also, of course, you get crew. Once you're a syndicate, you can start pooling resources to sail together. So, it just made sense for all sorts of reasons. I'm using a company called Yacht Fractions, who seem really good. You know, Dennis, the guy who runs it, has been around forever. So that seemed a good compromise for me.
So basically like a dating agency for boat owners.
Yeah.
They might disagree with that, but it's sort of, there's a relational side to boat ownership as well as just finding a boat and buying a boat.
Yes.
So
So
you've got to have people who get on and they've got similar priorities and similar budgets and that kind of stuff.
Exactly. And, I think we're just laying out how we're going to do it as a syndicate. There's a whole set of rules that come with the yacht fraction thing. Not rules, but there's a sort of agreement between everyone. But little things like if you sail on the boat, obviously you leave it clean and you leave it smart and all that, but you leave a little present for the next person coming on board. Might be a bottle of wine or a box of chocolates or something like that.
That's nice. I like that.
A whole bunch of little things like that. A few top tips about, I noticed this was going on and all that. To make it a real collaboration. But I think the predominant thing for me, beyond the finances, it makes a lot of sense financially, is that she's out there. She's sailing. She's being used. She'll go from being used. We probably sail 40 days a year, maybe a bit more.
I have to say that's pretty good going for most boats in this country.
But bear in mind that Sobec's just there. She's literally a 3-minute drive away for me. So if it's a nice evening, we'll go up to Ditsom, go up to Ditsom and just drop the anchor in Ditsom or stem a buoy and go to the pub. If you can call that boat ownership, if you're using the boat. So probably 30, 40 days a year, and our big trip to the Scillies that we tend to do. And that will go right up. That will go, I hope, up to 90, 100 days of the year of her being sailed, being used, all the systems being used. And that's great. She belongs out there. Yeah. Not,
that's what you want,
not stuck in stuck on a mooring somewhere, basically.
Yeah. Good. And finally, what's on the cards for this year? Once the P bracket's back in, once she's floating and working, what are you going to do with her?
So there's two things I really want to do with her. So I'm involved in my new book comes out.
We haven't mentioned those.
Don't worry.
Let's get the shameless plug in now.
Shameless plug. So this book comes out soon. It's the most. There we go. The numerous cameras.
Churchill's Killing House.
It's got the most amazing story, dare I say. One of the great untold stories of World War II. So basically, as everything was going wrong in World War II, so this was sort of June 1940, Dunkirk had just happened, we were a defeated nation. Churchill came up with this idea, amongst others, of getting a house, filling it full of eccentrics and Fruit Loops and street fighters and criminals and aristocrats, and coming up with a new way of fighting. And from that house, that academy of death, bad Hogwarts, emerged. The commandos, SAS, SBS, Paras, all came from this house. And no one's written a story of what happened in that house. So that's what the book's all about. And the place it all took place was the west coast of Scotland. So I'm about to head up there in the next few days, and we're doing an expedition where we're diving around there looking for artefacts. But I want to sail up there. I want to get Sobec up there because it's such a beautiful part of the world.
Oh, it's stunning, isn't it?
Yeah. Now, I don't know if I'll do it this year, but certainly it's on the agenda. She's so well equipped. She's such an amazing boat for longer voyages. And the other ones go to the Channel Islands. I've got a great mate who lives on the Channel Islands who's a really good sailor. And then said, look, mate, I'll fly across and then we'll sail across together. You know. So in a perfect world, I'd do it with the kids, but I don't know. I suspect they'd have a thing or two to say about that. But
it's beautiful once you get there, though.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's a relatively short hop.
Yes.
Because you can do it in daylight hours.
Yes, exactly.
So you can do it within one day and then you're there.
Yeah. Particularly, we leave Dartmouth at sort of 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning.
And you're there in time for drinking in the pub in the evening.
10 hours, 10 hours of good sailing, right? Say 12 hours, but you're absolutely right. And with a couple of you in the boat, it should be fine. So, that's the plan. So nothing massive. And ultimately sailing around Britain. I'd love to sail around Britain.
Yeah.
Can't get that idea out of my head. I'm sort of weirdly obsessed with it, of one day just taking Sobec and even just doing it in a series of day sails.
Yeah. The thing is, you'll do that and then you go, well, if I've got up to Shetland, it's only 150 miles to Norway, 200 miles to Norway, whatever it is.
Yeah.
May as well just carry on.
Yeah, so true.
Oh, the Lofotens are just up there, or the Baltic's just through there. And that's
true.
That's the thing that I find addictive about sailing.
Well, the interesting thing with all that, so when we did a voyage along the south coast for a conservation project we were doing, and by the end of that, I felt when I got back to Dartmouth, I was like, I could go anywhere now. Because I've spent several weeks on board sailing, doing nothing but sailing. And just your level of comfort and knowledge and experience with all the systems on the boat and the way she handles and everything. I was just, I felt I could go anywhere now, And that was the first year we had her, actually, weirdly. Yeah. But don't worry, I've regressed massively since then. I remember that guy. I was really impressed with that guy. I'm not that guy anymore. But again, you can't beat experience, can you? You can't beat just getting out there and sailing. That's the way to become a good sailor.
Absolutely,
actually. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I hope you have a wonderful summer of sailing.
Thank you. Thank you.
And keep us updated with the adventures and the mishaps as well.
The absurdity
and adventure,
Yeah, the slapstick of sailing. It is slapstick out there, So yes, I definitely will. I definitely will.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you to Luna and Dasha for letting us come to your house.
No, I need to take them for a walk now. They'll be kicking off shortly. So I'll get them out.
Amazing. Thank you.
Lovely. Cheers to you.
Right, guys, that's all we've got time for now. But if you enjoyed that, give it a thumbs up and a like and a share and all of that good stuff. And we will see you next time on the Sailing Podcast. Thanks to our sponsors, Sunsail, who made this episode possible. For more information on their latest offers, click on the link in the description below.